the world's second most feared intelligence agency. First place, naturally, goes to the Russian FSB. But what the CIA lacks in technique compared to its Russian competition, it more than makes up for in sheer audacity. Get ready to learn about the craziest CIA covert operations. 1. Spying is for the birds, literally. It's the height of the Cold War, East versus West, democracy versus Stalinism. With nuclear weapons aimed at each other's throats, the US and the Soviet Union are in a struggle for the very fate of the world itself. In this high-stakes, winner-take-all, zero-sum game, the United States unveils its newest weapon, a pigeon. Well, not just one pigeon, but thousands of them, all released in Eastern Europe with the hope they'll drop sensors that will help the US learn where the Soviet Union is conducting chemical weapon tests. Pigeons were even trained to fly cameras over facilities, with surprisingly good quality images being returned. But pigeons are far from the only birds enlisted to defeat the Reds. Ravens too are put to task fighting for freedom and the American way. These specially clever animals are trained to drop off listening devices on windowsills that are otherwise inaccessible. In at least one operation, a red laser beam was used to guide a raven to a target, drop off the bug, and then return to its handler with the use of a special lamp. Sadly, that particular operation yielded no usable intelligence, as the bug failed to work properly, but the CIA would go on to successfully use birds in many still classified operations. With the ability to fly loads up to 40 grams, there's little doubt that in today's age of smart, miniaturized electronics, birds are once more on the front lines of the CIA's covert wars. But the CIA's next crazy operation truly takes things out of this world. 2 flying saucers from the Earth. In the 1950s, flying saucers were all the rage, and it seemed like everybody was seeing one every other day. With events like Roswell and the real-life flying saucer invasion of Washington, we can hardly blame boomers for being afraid of aliens from outer space or south of the border. During the height of flying saucer mania, the CIA and the Air Force both got an idea. What if there was something to flying saucers? If alien flying saucers could cross the void of space, surely they would do a pretty good job of flying around the Earth, right? With generous funding from the federal government's black budget, the CIA and Air Force began collaborating on a flying saucer-shaped vehicle that could fly spy missions deep in the Soviet Union and shoot down bombers. After all, what better cover for a secret CIA vehicle than making it look like an alien is piloting it? Turns out there's a reason UFOs are claimed to use all sorts of science fiction technology like magnetic levitation or even ESP. Because without it, they fly about as well as a drunken frisbee. After an unknown number of years in testing, the flying saucer program was finally cancelled in 1961, as the design was deemed completely uncontrollable at high speeds and aerodynamically unstable. The CIA is meant to protect Americans, but the next crazy covert operation made the CIA an enemy of the American people. 3. Operation Blame the Cubans. It's 1962, and the Soviets have done the unthinkable. Cooperate with Cuba to place Soviet military forces literally next door to America. You know, sort of the way that the US had placed nuclear missiles in Turkey and on the Soviet Union's doorstep. Something had to be done about Cuban-Soviet cooperation before the relationship got too chummy, and that something was an invasion. Only one problem: how to justify an invasion of a tiny country that had absolutely nothing to do with the US. No worries, because the CIA quickly came to the rescue. Proposed to President John F. Kennedy, who immediately rejected the idea and fired more than a few of the CIA's top brass. Operation Northwoods was a convoluted plan to, in essence, carry out terrorist attacks all across the US and blame them on Cuban operatives. Plans included assassinations, the bombing of a restaurant in Washington, D.C., riots, and other acts of terrorism. Basically, the CIA was seeking permission to go all Grand Theft Auto on the US and then blame it on the Cubans. Thankfully, Kennedy immediately shot down the proposal, and along with it the careers of several CIA personnel. Who says the CIA doesn't have a heart though? The next CIA operation was all about turning former enemies into close new friends. 4. Operation Paperclip. After long years of fighting Nazi Germany, one thing was clear: Nazis were terrible, but they were pretty brilliant about coming up with ways to kill people. With the freeze of the Cold War setting in, The United States desperately needed some of that good old-fashioned Nazi murder know-how for itself. Barely 1 year after the end of hostilities, the U.S. President authorized Operation Paperclip, handled by the Office of Strategic Services and predecessor to the CIA. The goal of Paperclip was simple: lure or threaten former Nazi scientists into making the move to the United States and working for America. With the other option being getting swept up by Soviet KGB agents and forced to make missiles in Siberia. It wasn't exactly a hard sell getting Nazi scientists to make the move out to sunny California. The project remains one of the most controversial aspects of the post-World War II period, as many Nazi scientists who should have rightly been tried as war criminals were instead granted a free pass to live a very comfortable life in the US in exchange for their genius. One man in particular, Wernher von Braun, helped establish the American space program and masterminded the Apollo missions, but received lifelong criticism for his role in developing V-2 rockets to be used on civilians in Britain. The next CIA crazy covert operation is one they don't want you learning about, so feel free to shut this video off now. No, really, Uncle Sam would thank you. 5. Let the CIA do your thinking for you. The Cold War was a terrifying time for the world, with the US and Soviet Union locked in a bid for global supremacy. There was just one problem. Why should an auto plant worker from Detroit or a farmer from the Russian Urals care? What stake did the average Soviet or American citizen really have in the world's greatest international standoff to date? Turns out the average Joe on either side of the Iron Curtain had little stake in the posturing between East and West, but the CIA and KGB were here to fix that. Operation Mockingbird was a still little understood operation undertaken by the CIA to convince Americans that Russians were bad. While the full extent of the CIA's reach is still not known, a former investigation in the 1970s revealed that 50 journalists at the country's most influential newspapers all had secret links to the CIA and were compensated to run CIA-approved articles. The program was eventually shut down for, ironically, mirroring the exact same press manipulation and intimidation tactics that the Soviets used and freedom-loving, apple pie-eating Americans were supposed to abhor. Still, rumors persist to this day that the program never really ended, with conspiracy theorists now claiming that every headline they don't like is part of Operation Mockingbird. Like survival challenges, pooping in the woods, and learning to fight like a guerrilla fighter? Well, then the Cold War-era CIA sure had a job for you. 6. The CIA created the original doomsday preppers during the Cold War. Nothing kept the CIA awake at night more than the thought of Soviet tanks steamrolling the free countries of Western Europe. The paranoia of a Soviet invasion was so high that the CIA and the US military, along with NATO members, cooperated in the creation of a top-secret counter-invasion force. Codenamed Operation Gladio, members of NATO set about creating secret armies, personnel from all walks of life who would remain behind in case of a Soviet invasion and engage in a guerrilla war of resistance. The plan was simple: without using nuclear weapons to stop them, Soviet armies would easily reach all the way to France before the US could transfer the bulk of its forces to Europe. Rather than fight a certain-to-be-lost battle, nations along the border with the Soviet bloc would fight retreating actions, while leaving behind large amounts of clandestine forces. Once the Soviets swept past them, these secret armies would rise up to wreak havoc on Soviet supply and communication lines, grinding the Soviet advance to a halt. Operation Gladio was so secret that even some of the highest-ranking members of government and military in the nations these secret armies were staged in had no idea of their existence. It would only be at the end of the Cold War that the secret of these ghost armies would finally be revealed. Ironically, the world would also learn that despite all the paranoia, the Soviet Union didn't have a single plan to ever preemptively invade Western Europe, and was in fact just as terrified as the West that NATO would invade it first. The next crazy CIA covert operation was definitely the cat's meow. 7. Eavesdropping kitties. The internet loves cats. This is a fact. Turns out, the CIA also loves cats, or at least used to. Operation Acoustic Kitty may have sounded like a traditional codename meant to conceal the CIA's true intentions, but it was anything but. In the 1960s, the CIA spent millions on an operation that involved turning cats into spies. The operation involved surgically implanting cats with microphones and radio transmitters, effectively turning them into walking surveillance devices. The first mission for an acoustic kitty was to eavesdrop on two men in a park outside the Soviet compound in Washington, D.C. However, it ended tragically as the cat was hit by a car shortly after being released for its mission. The operation was deemed to be a complete failure and was abandoned due to the difficulty of training the cats and the high cost of the technology and surgeries. 8. The heart attack gun. In the 1970s, the CIA developed a secret weapon known as the heart attack gun. This gun was designed to be able to give someone a heart attack from a distance, without leaving any trace of the assassination. It was revealed in 1975 during a hearing held by the Church Committee. It's believed that the gun fired a dart which was almost undetectable but could deposit a poison that caused a heart attack in the victim. The dart would then dissolve and be almost untraceable. This gave the CIA the ability to take out someone without it being obvious that they were murdered. While it's unclear how extensively the heart attack gun was used, just the idea that such a weapon was developed is chilling. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of espionage and intrigue, and you're hungry for more stories that are sure to leave you astonished, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Also, make sure to ring the bell icon so you'll be notified every time we upload a new video. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you have any suggestions for future topics, we'd love to hear them. Thanks for watching, and stay curious out there. Subscribe for more captivating videos, and remember, the world is full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered.